Minister, as you know, I have raised this issue with you some time ago, and I've been concerned about it because it's going to have a huge and devastating effect on businesses along the West Coast. When I look at Connemara and the number of families that depend on craft shops to make their livelihood over a few months, and when I look at the disaster this year was, because even when it opened up, the kind of stock that was held by the shops was not really for Irish tourists. A lot of it had been bought for non-Irish. Now, I have to say, I've expressed time and time again my dissatisfaction with bills coming into the House, and particularly very important bills, when we're all up against the wall for time. I believe that we often spend too much time before we bring the bills to the House and wait too little time when the bills are in the House, when we're actually dealing with the meat of the bills, with the details, with what will go into law and what will stand. I think the idea of having a committee stage and then having a report stage that you can't put amendments in from committee to report is in principle wrong, unless it's an absolute emergency piece of legislation that couldn't have been foreseen. Now, Brexit has been foreseen for a long time. As I said when I spoke on the second stage of this bill, I think a lot of people in Europe and in Ireland went into denial about the British decision. Instead of saying they've had their referendum, they've made their decision, we accept the democratic right of the people of Britain to make the decision, and now we must prepare. And I cannot understand how it's happened that this bill has literally come into the Dáil with so little time for discussion and no time to do the thing that I think we all learnt in the seat that you're in, and that is that it's a good idea when something comes up at committee stage, when you see the validity of an argument, to say, look, I'll reflect on that and I'll come back at report stage. Now, that's not practical because of the configuration in the Dáil here in terms of the way the time has been laid out for this bill. But I think a practical suggestion was made that an undertaking would be given to look between now and the Shannon stage to introduce an amendment to deal with the issue. I think it's fair to say that finance officials will always take the negative side of everything. I think there are a lot of things in this country, if governments had just willy-nilly accepted finance proposals, very brave and innovative things that were thought up over the years, that went against the dead hand of advice, but are now lauded as being great ideas. So I think I can't see why it wouldn't be possible to reflect on this issue, to take the time between now and going into the Shannon to see and listen and cogitate on the validity of the arguments. I remember in the last Dáil, and I'm sure the last Concorder who's now left the chamber will remember well, there was a bill brought in, it was a Gaeltacht bill, 2012. And again, it was scheduled the same system. There was no rush. It shouldn't have been a rush. There was nothing emergency about it. It was foreseen. But for some reason of scheduling, they decided to do committee stage and report stage in one sitting in the Dáil. I'm proud to say that I organised a walkout in total of the Dáil that day. Some deputies I suspect didn't really know what they were walking out about. But they were walking out about the principle, not about the matter of the bill, but the principle of the bill of taking everything in one stage and not allowing engagement at the legislative stage of a bill where you have committee stage and report stage. Now, I know it's unusual for somebody in the government party to maybe speak in these terms, but I have felt passionately for years about the times that towards the end of session where things that were foreseen for years suddenly become so rushed that the most important function we have as elected representatives gets put aside, and governments who would like to take things on board, ministers who are often sitting in the seat and saying, I wish I had more time with this, I wish I had more time to think about it, are saying, yes, but I can't because I've been told that this has to be true in whatever time. So, Minister, I would hope that maybe you would give a commitment to reflect on this, and if it can't be done in the Dáil because of the rather bizarre arrangements in terms of this bill, that it could be done between the Dáil and the Seanad. Now, as you know, if an amendment to the government amendment was put through the Seanad, it would take 5 minutes back in the Dáil to get it through when it would be finished with in the Seanad. It could be done, in fact, on the same day that the Seanad would be passed. So, Minister, that's not an excuse. We've got till the end of the year to get this right. We still have a lot of sitting days to get this right. But I think to rush into it and to get it wrong could do an awful lot of damage to people who are already on their knees, who are suffering terribly after this disastrous year. And we know already that next year is not going to be a good tourist year. And I think it's fair to say that 22 might not even be a good tourist year. So giving a double whammy to tourism at this time, in my view, isn't a good idea.